At the end of our previous part, we promised to reveal to you the ultimate CABAL weapon, rolled out already and waiting for the start signal to kill millions of people in one go. You know by now that 5G is involved, right? The 60 gigahertz they have in store for us should do it. It should be sufficient in and of itself. But just to make sure our bodies will react to that frequency in the best possible way, the CABAL added a few more ingredients. This, my friends, is where COVID-19 comes in. The main COVID soup ingredients? Social distancing, face masks, nose swabs, PCR tests, quarantines, lockdowns, vaccinations, and fear. Now remember what we concluded at the end of our previous episode. All of this was done on purpose. Everything. Including, of course, the COVID pandemic. It was planned years ago as the depopulation agenda's crowning glory. Nobody knew what was about to unfold, except the CABAL. Their plan would turn out to be absolutely brilliant. Their strategy? Offering a solution to an all-encompassing problem. A problem so threatening, so frightening, that even the toughest among the useless eaters would beg for a solution. In the years and months leading up to the rollout of the CABAL's master plan, the necessary problem was fabricated in a way nobody had suspected. You see, it wasn't a killer virus made in China. We were all made to believe that narrative, but let's face it, the SARS-CoV-2 virus, as it's officially called, has never been isolated, purified, sequenced, characterized, and proven to exist. Not by anyone, anywhere in the world. No scientist, no virologist, no Nobel Prize winner succeeded in doing so. Not one study fulfilled the gold standard of Koch's postulates. They all failed. Concerned researchers and scientists asked over 90 institutions worldwide if they could provide any records describing the isolation of a SARS-CoV-2 virus taken from a deceased human. Not one could do so. Not one. Was this ever proven in court? Yes, it was. In Canada, Patrick King had the nerve to be in a group with more than 10 people. He was fined 1,200 Canadian dollars for violating the Alberta Public Health Act. King took it to court where he represented himself. He subpoenaed Dina Hinshaw, Chief Medical Officer of Health for Alberta, and asked her for proof of the SARS-CoV-2 virus being properly isolated. After all, only this would scientifically back the Alberta Public Health Act. Hinshaw was unable to deliver such proof. Scientifically speaking, there is no virus other than a digital theoretical abstraction made on a computer from a genomic database. Even the American CDC admitted they made a digital virus of 30,000 base pairs using 37 base pairs from unpurified samples. That's right, they used computer generation for the missing 29,963 base pairs. That, my dearest viewer, is called scientific fraud. But you weren't told this by Fauci, Gates, or any other mainstream media hotshot, right? To me, this computer generation step constitutes scientific fraud. Here is an equivalency. A group of researchers claim to have found a unicorn because they found a piece of a hoof, a hair from a tail, and a snippet of a horn. They then add that information into a computer and program it to recreate the unicorn. And they then claim this computer recreation is the real unicorn. Of course, they had never actually seen a unicorn, so could not possibly have examined its genetic makeup to compare their samples with the actual unicorn's hair, hooves, and horn. True science has no room for politics, majority rules, or consensus. Yet, according to Dr. Cohen, consensus was used to determine which digital SARS-CoV-2 model was the most real fake model. It went something like this. The researchers claim they decided which is the real genome of SARS-CoV-2 by consensus, sort of like a vote. Again, different computer programs will come up with different versions of the imaginary unicorn, so they come together as a group and decide which is the real imaginary unicorn. We're pretty sure that had they found a feather as well, the final consensus would have been something like this. And the people would have believed it because fraudulent scientists had said so. We hope you understand that we could stop this COVID episode right now. All that needed to be said has been said. COVID-19 has never been proven to exist. Those who say otherwise either lie to you in your face or they haven't understood what it means to isolate a virus. Some fact-checkers and even researchers believe that isolating means adding something to it, like monkey kidney cells and fetal bovine serum. That is not the scientific definition of isolation. The closest we have ever come to scientific evidence of an isolated virus is shown in this picture. COVID-19 has never been proven to exist. The end. So why did this nasty fairy tale continue? Well, let's just say that the majority of the 99% are easy to manipulate and mislead. And so, this episode continues. And to tell you the truth, the things we discovered while researching this most evil scam ever are so shocking and so much bigger than we suspected that we must continue exposing the cabal's true face. You must look it in the eyes in order to understand that we, the people, have but one chance left to unite and fight the evil we are dealing with. So, back to our storyline. The plan to create a killer virus had failed. But they tried alright. Remember the Wuhan Institute of Virology? Millions of dollars went there from the US, from criminals like Anthony Fauci and Charles Lieber. Remember the Fauci emails that will cause his downfall? Please do some research on gain of function, the project where they try to create a virus that would be able to jump from bat to humans, and subsequently from humans to other humans. Now that last bit is a problem. Surely you've heard of Lyme disease. A virus-infected tick bites a human being and that human being gets sick. But he or she cannot transmit the disease to another person. Not by hugging, not by sneezing, not even by having sex. For a virus to adapt to the DNA of a new host so it can feed itself and multiply and then become highly contagious takes many, many decades in nature. In this case, the Cabal simply ran out of time. Their original plan in terms of creating a highly contagious and deadly virus had failed. There was nothing more than an ordinary winter flu. Now those are the scientific facts, but of course the Cabal couldn't work with that. They needed a monster of a threat. A problem so great that we, the people, would beg for a solution. A common flu simply wouldn't do it. And so a narrative was created. A narrative about a killer virus from Wuhan. The story became bigger and bigger. China closed its borders, but the killer virus managed to escape and contaminate the entire world. The UN took control. The WHO worked day and night to fight this monster. The mainstream media spread the narrative like a real virus. And the people held their breath. Everywhere in the world, old people died of the flu. Like every flu season, each and every year. But the mainstream media, bought and raised by the Cabal, did their job magnificently. Every day, non-stop, they repeated their horror stories about the millions of people who would die in the coming months. Repetition, repetition, repetition. People were brainwashed to the extent of being only able to repeat what they had heard on the news. Those who raised critical questions were labeled conspiracy theorists. They were dangerous and should not be heard. They were to become the outcasts of society. Now the funny thing is, most people still believe that this pandemic was a sudden outbreak. All of a sudden it was there at the beginning of 2020. Well, no, not correct. Let's have a look at some hard facts that will show us that the entire COVID-19 event was a well-prepared and rehearsed project. What happened? Remember the swine flu outbreak in the US in the spring of 2009? Well, according to the CDC's website, the WHO declared the swine flu a pandemic on June 11, which was insane as only a few people had died from the infection. But it was spreading from the US to other countries, and that made it a pandemic. Now, if you're as old as we are, you know that this is not severe enough to be called a pandemic. Not even close. Our encyclopedias read, a pandemic consisted of simultaneous epidemic outbreaks worldwide with enormous numbers of deaths and illness. That was precisely the definition used by the WHO. Until May the 5th, 2009. On that day, 5 weeks before the official outbreak of the swine flu pandemic, the WHO quietly changed the definition by removing the severity and high mortality criteria. What was left? Just the spread of a disease over several countries. How convenient. Now guess what? The NIH denies that the definition of a pandemic was ever changed by the WHO. Shame on those who say otherwise. It has undermined the public trust in health officials. Seriously? Have a look at the evidence. Not that you can still find it on the WHO website. everything has been deleted. But there's a magical tool called the Wayback Machine. You can delete all you want from the internet, but it never disappears. It just gets hidden in a different place when nobody looks for it. The Wayback Machine helps you track the original site, page, or even sentence. See for yourself. Just a random day in 2003. Enormous numbers of deaths and illness. March 2009. Enormous numbers of deaths and illness. May 4, 2009. Enormous numbers of deaths and illness. And then, May 5, 2009. A completely different story, but no real definition yet. They were still thinking about it, or so it seems. The next day they changed it again. May 6. A pandemic is a worldwide epidemic of a disease. Pandemics can be either mild or severe in the illness and death they cause. And it stayed that way. So, NIH, what exactly did you say again? The WHO did not change its definition of pandemic influenza. And what did you say to those who claimed the WHO did change the definition? It undermined the public trust in health officials. No shit! We wonder how that happened. And it only gets better. Let's have a look at the CDC's very own timeline. April 15, first human infection. April 17, second human infection. April 21, the CDC starts developing a candidate vaccine virus. My, 2 flu infections and oh my god, we're all gonna die! We need a vaccine? But hey, let's not judge. They are the professionals, alright? They know what they're doing. One day later, April 22, the CDC activates its Emergency Operations Center. Wow, don't you feel safe knowing that these people are there for you when you need them? I mean, 2 people get a new kind of flu and voila! Ready to save lives. And look how professional that is. April 23. 2 more people are now infected. April 24. The CDC uploads complete gene sequences of the new virus to an international influenza database. Why am I thinking about unicorns right now? April 25. The WHO declares a public health emergency of international concern. Well, of course they did. 4 people down with the flu. What else could they do? April 28. The FDA approves a new CDC test to detect H1N1 infections. Wow. Now that's what we call dedication. In 2 weeks' time, this test was both developed and FDA approved. In July, only 3 months after the first US infection, the CDC stopped keeping track of new infections or casualties.
We found was by the 3rd week in July, the CDC advised states to stop testing for individual cases of H1N1 flu, and they stopped counting individual cases. The rationale that the CDC gave was, well, why continue wasting resources tracking when we already have established there is an epidemic? Why continue wasting resources tracking when we already have established there is an epidemic?
What followed was identical to the SARS-CoV-2 script. But there were no lockdowns. It suddenly stopped. The WHO officially declared the end of the pandemic in August 2010. What happened? On October 21, 2009, CBS investigative reporter Cheryl Atkinson told Washington Unplugged that 3 months of investigation had proven that only a tiny percentage of suspected cases turned out to test positive for the swine flu.
If you've been diagnosed with probable or presumed 2009 H1N1 or swine flu in recent months, you may be surprised to know this. The odds are you didn't have H1N1 flu. In fact, you probably didn't have flu at all. Only a small fraction of cases that doctors flagged as most likely to be swine flu actually tested positive for swine flu at state labs. The vast majority of the cases were negative.
There were hardly any real cases, contrary to what the public was told by the mainstream media. But Atkinson's shocking discoveries were not aired on TV. It was Dr. Wolfgang Wodarg, lung specialist and former chair of Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, who told the world that the swine flu was only a mild flu. He called the WHO's false pandemic flu campaign one of the greatest medicine scandals of the century. Dr. Wodarg was a well-respected and very well-known physician and politician. His message reached many millions of people. It seems like the cabal had not expected this. They must have been outraged. How could one man bust up their plans? And so, they worked their evil plan towards perfection. You see, Dr. Wodarg told the people there was no pandemic on TV. And it was this communication where things went wrong. The solution lied in the ultimate deployment of all communication means and methods. Years of fine-tuning went by. And then, almost 5 years before the official outbreak of COVID-19, in 2015, Bill Gates told the world that the next great deadly threat to humanity would not be a war, but a virus.
Today, the greatest risk of global catastrophe doesn't look like this. Instead, it looks like this. If anything kills over 10 million people in the next few decades, it's most likely to be a highly infectious virus rather than a war.
He even showed the H1N1 virus, eerily similar to our future COVID-19 global enemy. Nobody realized what he had just proclaimed, except, of course, the adepts, the cabal insiders. The stage had been set. Then, 2 years before the official outbreak, in 2017, the World Bank used its WITS software to look into its crystal ball. And guess what they saw? They saw the COVID-19 pandemic 2 years into the future. And so, the World Bank decided it would be best for humanity and for the world as a whole to produce and distribute millions of COVID-19 test kits. That's right. A special test kit was invented to help fight a virus that didn't even exist just yet. My, what a gift! WITS produced an exports list per country for COVID-19 test kits. Product code 300215. Now, of course, our fact-checkers deny anything and everything, saying the export product wasn't COVID-19 test kits, but medical test kits. Well, that is only true after people started noticing and reporting the World Bank's rare ability to see into the future, which occurred in 2019. Product 300215 was quickly changed into medical test kits. Thank you once again, Wayback Machine, for bringing the truth back to us. And it happened again with a different product code, 902780. So, not a glitch in the software, but true paranormal abilities to predict the future, my friends. Or plain fraud. You decide. Oh, and it wasn't just test kits. It was also swab and viral transport medium sets. Product code 382100. All the way back to 2017. This is the version of the World Bank. Category medical test kits. But using the Wayback Machine, category COVID-19 test kits. The same happened in 2018. So, the fact checkers can scream bloody murder, but these are the facts. You can delete your inconvenient truths from the internet all you want, but they'll never disappear. One just needs to know how to find one's way in digital archives. This, dearest viewers, is the naked truth. Even though the name COVID-19 wasn't introduced by the WHO until February the 11th, 2020, it was already in use for years behind the scenes, full on, to prepare their wicked plandemic. That's right, not a pandemic, but a plandemic. Planned years in advance as the ultimate weapon to create a new world order. Do you want more evidence? Oh, don't worry, we'll supply it, promise. What else? Also in 2017, a complete guide was written called The Sparse Pandemic 2025 to 28, a futuristic scenario for public health risk communicators by the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security. It described the complete picture of the planned COVID-19 pandemic. Seriously. Of course, it wasn't called COVID-19, but it was pretty darn close. They called it a novel coronavirus. What a funny coincidence that COVID-19 was actually called novel coronavirus during the first weeks of the outbreak. Oh, and it was a SARS, a severe acute respiratory syndrome. But in this fictitious, futuristic case, it was called SPARS, after the town of St. Paul, where the first outbreak of the disease occurred. How original! In all fairness, the Johns Hopkins Center had outdone themselves. In their futuristic guide, they had thought of everything. The main focus was on communication challenges, for instance concerning the development and rollout of a vaccine that had severe side effects. Every single detail had been worked out, including the vital role of the mainstream media and the use of social media. And of course, there were communication skills on how to deal with anti-vaxxers, how to overrule them, for instance, by means of commercials with VIPs. Movie stars promoting the vaccine, or by inventing an interview with an alleged anti-vaxxer whose child got infected and could only be saved at the very last minute by the vaccine. Of course, the manual was entirely fictional. Unreal, isn't it? 2017. Everything was meticulously planned and brilliantly executed. Well done, Johns Hopkins Center. Or should we say, well done, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. In 2019, once again before COVID-19 was ever mentioned, the CABAL played 3 little games with us by shamelessly showing what they had in mind for us. First, Netflix aired Pandemic: How to Prevent an Outbreak, a series about the development of a universal vaccine. Who was the main sponsor of this series? Bill Gates. Then there were 2 carefully planned simulation exercises. One in Wuhan, of all places, and one in New York. In September, at Jianhe Airport, Wuhan, the infection of a passenger with the coronavirus was staged. 1 month later, Event 201, a global pandemic exercise, took place in New York, enacting the outbreak of, yet again, a coronavirus. It was a partnership of the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security with the World Economic Forum and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. A lot of emphasis during this exercise was put on the problem of disinformation about vaccines. Misinformation and disinformation are likely to be serious threats during a public health emergency. Unfortunately, thus far, there are limited ways to control the propagation of misinformation, leading to potentially draconian methods to manage this problem. Everything was done on purpose. Unfortunately, the world wasn't paying attention just yet. It was in our face, but we had no idea what was about to unfold. Do you want to see what happened next, in a way it wasn't presented to you before? Then follow me to part 19.